There is a particular quality of silence that belongs only to the deepest hours of the night, that liminal space between the last echo of yesterday and the first breath of tomorrow. It's a quiet so profound, so absolute, that you can almost feel its texture, a soft, velvety pressure in your ears. It is the silence of a world holding its breath, a state of suspended animation where the only expected sounds are the intimate symphony of your own home. The gentle, electrical sigh of the refrigerator cycling on and off, the distant, mournful cry of a train slicing through the dark miles away, or the soft, percussive ticking of a house settling its old bones. These are the sounds of safety, the acoustic wallpaper of our lives. They are the noises we have learned to trust, to ignore, to fold into the very fabric of our subconscious until they are no longer heard, but simply felt as part of the ambient peace. But imagine, just for a moment, that you are lying in your bed, adrift in this familiar, comfortable sea of quiet, and then something new emerges from the depths, a sound that does not belong, a sound that seems to violate the sacred contract of the night. It isn't sharp or sudden, like a breaking glass or a slamming door. It is far more insidious. It is a low, persistent, resonant drone that seems to come from nowhere, and yet from everywhere all at once. It is not the house. It is not the wind whispering through the eaves. It feels older, more fundamental, more primal. It's a sound that seems to bypass the delicate mechanism of the ears and resonate deep within your sternum. A physical vibration that prickles the fine hairs on your arms and yanks you from the soft edge of sleep into a state of stark, primal alertness. Your body recognizes it as a threat before your mind can even begin to process what it is. For decades, and as we will discover, perhaps for centuries, people from every inhabited continent on this planet have been reporting these auditory intruders. They are phantom noises, acoustic anomalies that stubbornly and frustratingly defy simple, rational explanation. They exist on a vast and troubling spectrum of the strange. At one end, there is the maddening, persistent low-frequency thrum that can methodically push individuals to the very brink of their sanity. At the other, there are the sudden, terrifying, metallic blasts from the sky that sound for all the world like the trumpets of an impending apocalypse. These are not just isolated incidents. This is not merely the product of overactive imaginations or overtired minds. This is a genuine global phenomenon, documented in peer-reviewed scientific papers, captured on thousands upon thousands of recordings, and debated endlessly and passionately by millions of people online. The individuals who hear these sounds, the hearers as they have come to be called, are often met with a crushing wall of skepticism and dismissal. They are told they're imagining it, that it must be tinnitus, that it's just a nearby factory they've only just noticed. But for the sufferers, the experience is profoundly, unshakably real. It is deeply personal, and for many, it is utterly terrifying. It is an experience of acoustic gaslighting on a planetary scale, a lonely battle against an invisible, omnipresent foe. Today, we are going to venture deep into this world of unexplained auditory phenomena. We will journey into the very heart of this acoustic mystery, listening closely to the stories of those who have been tormented by a relentless, invisible noise known simply, and with chilling understatement, as the hum. And then, we will turn our gaze and our microphones to the skies, where chilling apocalyptic sounds, dubbed sky trumpets, have been recorded from the quiet, rain-soaked suburbs of British Columbia to the war-torn streets of Kiev, from the sun-drenched coasts of Australia to the frozen industrial plains of Germany. What are these strange sounds from the sky above and the ground below? Are they the groans of a restless planet, the earth itself stirring in its sleep? Are they the unintentional, acoustic byproducts of secret military technology shaping our atmosphere in ways we cannot comprehend? Are we witnessing a bizarre form of mass auditory illusion, a psychological quirk of the anxious modern age, amplified by the echo chamber of the internet? Or, as a growing and vocal number of people believe, are we bearing witness to something far, far stranger, something that hints at a reality just beyond the veil of our limited perception? We will investigate the landmark cases in painstaking detail. We will dissect the competing scientific theories, giving each its due. And we will not shy away from exploring the more esoteric, conspiratorial, and supernatural explanations that have inevitably grown around this profound enigma. This is a journey into a mystery that you cannot see, a mystery you cannot touch, but one that you might, one day, hear for yourself. So turn down the lights, find a comfortable position, and listen. Listen not just to my voice, but to the silence that surrounds you, the silence you take for granted. We're about to explore the deep, dark, and unnerving world of the hum and the sky trumpets. Part 1. The Personal Torment. Chapter 1. The Anatomy of a Phantom. Let's begin our investigation with the more insidious of our two mysteries. The one that doesn't roar into your life, but seeps in, like a slow-acting, colorless poison. The one that doesn't announce itself with a terrifying blast, but instead weaves itself into the quietest moments of your life until it becomes an inseparable, unbearable part of your reality. Let's talk about the hum. To truly understand the hum, you have to perform an act of deep empathy. You have to imagine being perpetually haunted by a sound that, for all intents and purposes, doesn't exist for anyone else in your world. It is an invisible cage of noise, built just for you. The sound itself is most commonly described as a low-frequency, droning or throbbing noise. The analogies are consistent across decades and continents. It's like a large diesel engine idling somewhere just over the horizon, always in the distance but never getting closer or farther away. It's like the hum of a powerful generator, the thrum of a naval vessel, the low bass note from a party you can't locate and can't escape. It is relentless. It is invasive. And for the estimated 2 to 4% of the global population who can perceive it, it can be a source of pure, unending, sanity-shredding torture. These are not people with conventional hearing problems. In fact, numerous studies conducted on hearers have shown that many of them possess exceptionally acute hearing, particularly in the very low frequency ranges, from roughly 20 to 100 Hz, a range where most people's hearing sensitivity drops off significantly. Their sensitivity, their unique gift, becomes their curse. The experience is profoundly, cruelly isolating. Imagine this scenario played out thousands of times in homes across the world. It's 2 a.m. You haven't slept. The sound is a physical presence in the room. You turn to your spouse, your partner, the person you trust most in the world, and you whisper, "Do you hear that? Please just listen. It's so loud tonight." They listen for a moment, their face a mask of concentration, and then they shake their head with a look that is a devastating cocktail of pity, concern, and perhaps a flicker of annoyance. "I don't hear anything, honey. It's just quiet." In that moment, your reality splits from theirs. You are alone in your sensory experience. You ask your neighbors, your friends. They look at you as if you're crazy, offering unhelpful suggestions about checking your boiler or the pool pump. You go to a doctor, desperate for an answer, for validation. They will listen patiently, and then they will almost invariably diagnose it as subjective tinnitus, that familiar ringing, hissing, or buzzing sound in the ears that many of us experience from time to time, often after exposure to loud noise. But the hearers of the hum are adamant, almost universally so. This is different. Tinnitus, they explain with the weary patience of someone who has had this conversation 100 times, is a sound that feels like it's inside your head. It's a neurological or physiological artifact, a phantom limb of sound. The hum, they insist, is an external sound, coming from the outside world. It has a physical source even if it cannot be found. They often report that it's directional, seeming to come from a particular point on the horizon. Many find they can escape it, or at least lessen its intensity, by getting into a car and driving for several miles. The sound fades, only to return when they re-enter the affected zone. This is not a characteristic of tinnitus. The hum is almost always reported as being worse indoors, especially in smaller rooms. This suggests that the long wavelengths of the low-frequency sound are being amplified by the structure itself, creating standing waves that turn a bedroom into a resonance chamber. And it is at its most ferocious, its most malevolent at night. During the day, the ambient sounds of the world traffic, conversations, birdsong, construction can provide a masking effect, a sonic camouflage for the hum. But as the world falls silent, the camouflage is stripped away, leaving the hearer alone and defenseless with their acoustic tormentor. The psychological toll is immense and well documented in the communities that have formed around this phenomenon. It's a slow, grinding erosion of the self. It begins with simple annoyance, which blossoms into a constant, simmering frustration. This, in turn, fuels a state of hypervigilance and anxiety. Sleep deprivation becomes chronic, leading to a devastating cascade of secondary physical and mental health issues. Impaired cognitive function, memory loss, a weakened immune system. Concentration becomes a Herculean task. Irritability is constant, straining relationships with family and friends who cannot understand what they are going through. This can progress into deep clinical depression. And in a few tragic, extreme, and heartbreaking cases, well documented in newspaper reports, hearers have been driven to take their own lives, seeing it as the only way to finally achieve the peace and quiet they so desperately crave. This is not a new phenomenon, not a disease of the internet age. While online forums on platforms like Reddit and dedicated websites have become a vital lifeline for hearers, a virtual sanctuary where they can connect with others, share coping strategies, and simply be believed, the story of the hum stretches back much further. To trace its modern origins, our first major stop on this auditory journey takes us across the Atlantic, to the United Kingdom, specifically to the vibrant historic port city of Bristol, during the late 1970s. Chapter 2. The Bristol Benchmark. The Bristol of the late 1970s was a city in transition. A place of historic Georgian architecture and a proud maritime past. It was also a bustling industrial hub. It was against this backdrop that the phenomenon first forced its way into the public consciousness. It started as a trickle of letters to the editor of the city's main newspaper, the Bristol Post. A scattered few residents from different neighborhoods like Clifton and Cotham wrote in to complain about a strange, low-pitched throbbing or humming sound, most noticeable during the quiet hours of the night. At first, these were treated as isolated curiosities. But the trickle soon became a stream and then a flood. By 1979, hundreds of residents had come forward, all reporting the same thing. The consistency of the descriptions was startling. It was a low thrum like a distant diesel engine that never shut off. It was a pulsation that you could sometimes feel in your teeth and chest. It was causing headaches, nausea, dizziness, and for many, a desperate, maddening inability to sleep. The story, initially a local oddity, was picked up by the national press. The Bristol hum was born, and with it, a modern mystery. Imagine the public meetings in drafty community halls. Worried, exhausted citizens stepping up to the microphone, one after another, trying to put words to their invisible torment, relieved to find they are not alone. One woman, a middle-aged teacher, tells a reporter, "It's a form of torture. It just grinds you down day after day, night after night. You start to dread the sun going down." A retired shipyard worker describes how he has started sleeping in his garden shed, just to get a few hours of relief. To its immense credit, The Bristol City Council took the complaints very seriously. They didn't dismiss their citizens as a collection of crackpots and hypochondriacs. They launched a comprehensive, wide-ranging investigation, bringing in acoustic experts from universities like the University of Salford to try and pinpoint the source. The prevailing theory, the most logical assumption, was that it had to be industrial noise. The prime suspect was the large, sprawling complex of factories and industrial sites in the Avonmouth area, a place of chemical plants and smelting works. Another suspect was the constant, low-frequency rumble of traffic from the recently constructed M32 motorway that cut through the city. The investigators deployed what was, for the time, state-of-the-art sound measuring equipment. They placed sensitive microphones all over the city, inside the homes of the complainants and in quiet, open areas like public parks. Their goal was to triangulate the source, to find the acoustic ground zero of the noise. They spent months collecting data, poring over charts of frequencies and decibel levels, comparing readings taken at different times of day and in different weather conditions. And in the end, after all this effort, they found almost nothing. Well, that's not entirely accurate. Their sensitive equipment did manage to pick up a distinct spike of acoustic energy right in the low-frequency range the sufferers were describing, centered around 40 Hz. The sound was objectively real. It was there, but they could not isolate a single point of origin. It seemed to be ambient, a blanket of sound that covered a wide area of the city, with no discernible epicenter. It was as if the air itself was humming. And crucially, the sound they recorded was at a very low decibel level, technically below the threshold of what was considered normal human hearing for that frequency. This only deepened the mystery, created a paradox. How could a sound that was barely detectable by their most sensitive scientific instruments be causing such profound and genuine distress to hundreds of people? The investigation concluded without a conclusion. The official report acknowledged the reality of the sound but confessed its inability to identify a source or propose a solution. The Bristol hum eventually faded from the headlines, becoming a frustrating and inconclusive chapter in the city's history, a piece of local folklore. But it never truly went away. The complaints continued, a low-level grumble in the city's background noise. Bristol became the benchmark case for this bizarre phenomenon. It established the pattern that we see repeated, time and time again, all over the world. A significant number of people in a specific geographic area begin to report a strange sound. An official investigation is launched, full of hope and scientific rigor, and the results are almost always maddeningly, frustratingly inconclusive. But to find the most famous, the most intensely studied, and arguably the most profoundly mysterious case of the hum, we must cross the Atlantic Ocean. We need to travel to a small, high-desert town in northern New Mexico, a place renowned for its stark, sun-drenched beauty, its vibrant multicultural art colonies, and its enigmatic, invisible resident. We need to go to Taos. Chapter 3, The Enigma of Taos. The story of the Taos hum enters the public consciousness in the early 1990s. Taos is a place of intense quiet. Nestled in a high-desert plateau, far from the roar of major cities, the ambient sound level is naturally very low. It is a place where you can hear the whisper of the wind through the sagebrush, the cry of a hawk circling overhead. It is, ironically, the perfect place to notice a sound that shouldn't be there. Just as in Bristol a decade earlier, a growing number of residents began reporting a strange, low-frequency sound. They called it, simply, the hum. A formal survey, conducted by a University of New Mexico engineering professor named Jim Mullins, found that about 2% of the town's population could hear it consistently. Their descriptions were a perfect, chilling echo of the Bristol case. Half a world and a different culture away. A pulsation, a vibration, a relentless drone. The classic, distant diesel engine analogy was used again and again. Some hearers reported that they could not only hear it, but they could feel it, a physical vibration in their bones, a pressure in their sinuses, a sensation of vertigo. The quiet of the desert had been broken. The situation in Taos quickly gained national and even international attention. It was a story tailor-made for the media, a mysterious affliction in a beautiful, slightly eccentric artist town. It was covered by major news networks like ABC's 2020, and it was prominently featured in a memorable episode of the popular TV show Unsolved Mysteries, complete with dramatic reenactments. The sheer frustration of the hearers was palpable and deeply sympathetic. One resident, a retired university professor named Bobby Jones, became a spokesperson for the hearers, telling a reporter, "It's a torture. It's a low-level, horrible torture. Sometimes you just want to scream." Another hearer, a real estate agent named Joe Stropnick, described how the sound had robbed him of his peace, his ability to enjoy the quiet solitude that had drawn him to Taos in the first place. The media pressure, combined with the organized and articulate efforts of the local hearers who formed a group to advocate for themselves, eventually reached the highest levels of government. In an almost unprecedented move for such a localized and strange phenomenon, the United States Congress itself got involved. In 1993, at the behest of New Mexico's congressional delegation, they mandated and funded a full-scale, multidisciplinary scientific investigation. This was to be the definitive inquiry, the one that would finally solve the mystery of the hum. A dream team of scientists and engineers from some of the nation's most prestigious and powerful research institutions, the University of New Mexico, the renowned Sandia National Laboratories, and the legendary Los Alamos National Laboratory, birthplace of the atomic bomb, descended on Taos. This was the scientific cavalry, armed with the full might of late 20th century technology, arriving to slay the acoustic dragon. They brought with them a veritable arsenal of high-tech sensory equipment. They set up ultrasensitive seismometers to detect even the faintest ground vibrations. They deployed magnetometers to measure fluctuations in the local geomagnetic field. They erected VLF antennas, specifically designed to pick up very low-frequency radio waves. They blanketed the area with an array of sophisticated microphones, acoustic sensors, and parabolic dishes. They conducted extensive, detailed interviews with dozens of the hearers. They had them undergo a battery of audiological tests in soundproof chambers. They meticulously mapped the locations where the sound was reported to be most intense. For weeks, they collected a mountain of data, methodically analyzing every possible mundane source. The electrical power grid, natural gas pipelines, seismic activity, any and all industrial facilities in the surrounding county. Their final report, published a year later, was a masterpiece of scientific due diligence, a testament to the thoroughness of their process. And for the long-suffering hearers of Taos, it was a profound and bitter disappointment. The official, scientifically backed conclusion? They could not identify the source of the hum. They did, however, rule out a lot of possibilities. It wasn't seismic activity in the conventional sense. It wasn't a particular industrial facility or piece of machinery. They found no anomalies in the local power grid that could account for it. And most frustratingly of all, their array of sensitive microphones could not definitively record an external acoustic signal that correlated with what the hearers were reporting. The objective data did not match the subjective experience. The mystery, far from being solved, had only deepened, now with the stamp of official scientific bafflement. Joe Mullins, the professor who had done the initial survey and was a key part of the congressional team, was left utterly flummoxed. He famously stated that the Taos hum was more of a mystery than ever. The investigation did, however, uncover one fascinating and highly controversial clue. During the laboratory testing phase, they discovered that a significant number of the self-identified hearers could, under controlled conditions, voluntarily generate a faint sound from their own ears. This is a very real, though not widely known, phenomenon called spontaneous otoacoustic emissions, or SOAEs. It's a process where the cochlea, the snail-shaped organ in the inner ear that translates vibrations into nerve impulses, actually produces its own faint sounds as part of the mechanical process of hearing. The theory that emerged from this finding was provocative and, for the hearers, insulting. Perhaps the hearers of Taos weren't hearing an external noise at all. Perhaps they were perceiving their own internal biological sounds, their own otoacoustic emissions, which were being amplified by the extremely quiet high-desert environment of Taos. In essence, they were hearing themselves. This theory, while scientifically elegant, did not satisfy the hearers in the slightest. They were insistent. The sound was external. It was a physical phenomenon. They could move away from it by driving out of town. It was demonstrably worse in certain locations within the town. And most importantly, why would so many people in one specific geographic location suddenly and simultaneously start hearing their own ears? The geographical clustering of the phenomenon was the key element that the SOAE theory couldn't easily explain. Another prominent theory that was floated, and one that still holds immense sway in conspiracy-minded circles, was that the hearers were being affected by very low-frequency or VLF radio transmissions. The United States Navy operates a global network of powerful VLF transmitters for a very specific purpose: to communicate with its submerged submarine fleet, as VLF waves can penetrate seawater. These powerful radio waves can travel vast distances and can, in theory, cause a phenomenon known as the electrophonic effect, where the human brain or auditory system directly perceives the electromagnetic radiation as sound. A more common theory is that the waves could interact with metallic objects in the environment, things like power lines, pipes, bed springs, or even the metal fillings in a person's teeth, causing them to vibrate at a low frequency and produce an audible sound. Could the hearers of Taos, nestled in a state with a heavy military and advanced research presence, be living in an accidental hotspot for these secret military signals? It's a compelling and tantalizing idea, but one that is almost impossible to prove without access to highly classified military data on transmitter locations, frequencies, and power levels. And so, the Taos hum remains a genuine, scientifically vetted enigma. It is a premier case study in the limitations of both our perception and our technology. It's a stark and humbling reminder that there are things happening in our world that we simply do not yet understand. Chapter 4: The Industrial Suspects and Solved Cases. It would be a mistake, however, to assume that all hums are destined to remain so mysterious. The narrative of the hum is not one of universal insolvability. For our next major case, we travel north across the border into Canada, to the industrial city of Windsor, Ontario. The Windsor hum, which began to be widely and loudly reported around 2011, had all the classic hallmarks of the phenomenon. A deep, low-frequency rumble, often described as a physical vibration, felt as much as it was heard. It was worse at night and indoors. It was causing vibrations in houses, rattling windows, and leading to the now familiar litany of health complaints: headaches, irritability, nausea, and chronic, debilitating sleep loss. Residents, armed with the knowledge of cases like Taos and Bristol, formed action groups, created Facebook pages, petitioned their government, and demanded answers. Unlike in Taos, however, there was a very obvious, very visible, and very noisy suspect. Just across the Detroit River, a mere stone's throw from Canadian soil, lay Zug Island. Zug Island is not a picturesque tourist destination. It is a heavily industrialized, almost post-apocalyptic-looking piece of land located on the American side, in the city of River Rouge, Michigan. For decades, it was a place of towering smokestacks, belching fire and smoke, a landscape of blast furnaces, coke ovens, and steel manufacturing. is a place that looks exactly like it should make a constant, hellish noise. Canadian researchers, funded by their government and working with the University of Windsor, conducted extensive and highly sophisticated studies. Using advanced techniques like acoustic beamforming, which uses an array of microphones to visually map the source of a sound, they were able to triangulate the origin of the Windsor hum with a very high degree of certainty. The sound, they concluded, was not a mystery. It was coming from the blast furnace operations at the United States Steel facility on Zug Island. Case closed, right? Well, not quite. What followed was a years-long, frustrating saga of political and corporate stalemate. U.S. Steel was largely uncooperative, and American authorities were slow to act on a problem that was primarily affecting Canadian citizens across an international border. The hum became a diplomatic incident, a constant source of industrial torment, and a daily reminder of the complexities of international environmental regulation. Then, in April of 2020, something remarkable happened. The hum stopped, or at least it dramatically decreased to the point of being unnoticeable for most residents. The reason? U.S. Steel had officially and permanently idled its operations on Zug Island. The furnaces went cold. For the long-suffering residents of Windsor, it was a moment of profound and welcome silence, a final confirmation that their tormentor had been industrial all along. The Windsor hum provides a powerful and important counter-narrative. It proves that, at least in some cases, the hum is exactly what it sounds like, industrial noise. The mystery was not the source, but the politics of stopping it. Another solved case is the Kokomo hum in Indiana. In the early 2000s, residents of this Midwestern city began reporting a classic hum. After a lengthy investigation by the city, the source was traced not to one, but to two separate industrial plants. One was a Daimler-Chrysler plant emitting a tone at 36 Hz from its cooling towers. The other was a Haynes International plant emitting a 10 Hz tone from a furnace. Once the companies implemented noise abatement measures, the reports of the hum in Kokomo largely ceased. These solved cases are crucial. They ground the phenomenon in reality. They show that dedicated investigation can sometimes yield concrete results. But they also, by contrast, make the unsolved cases even more mysterious. If the Windsor hum was a steel plant, and the Kokomo hum was a combination of factories, then what is the Taos hum? What is the Bristol hum? What about the countless other hums that have been reported in quiet rural areas and sleepy suburbs all over the world, far from any heavy industry? The Largs hum in the small coastal town of Largs, Scotland, which locals have blamed on everything from naval base operations to gas pipelines to, bizarrely, the mating calls of a specific type of fish. The Bondi hum in Sydney, Australia, which plagues residents of the famous and largely residential beachside suburb. Can all of these disparate cases be traced back to a specific, hidden industrial source? It seems highly unlikely. Chapter 5, The Global Chorus and the Unifying Theories. So, after decades of reports, investigations, and a handful of solved cases, what are we left with? We are left with a global phenomenon that resists a single, simple explanation. The hum is not one thing. It's almost certainly a catch-all term, a label we have applied to a variety of different phenomena, both natural and man-made. Let's summarize the primary competing theories, seeing them not as mutually exclusive, but as potential contributors to the overall puzzle. First, the industrial noise theory. As we've seen in Windsor and Kokomo, this is clearly the explanation for some cases. The problem is that it requires a source, and in many of the most famous locations, no such source can be found. Second, the biological theory. This theory points to internal sources like tinnitus and spontaneous otoacoustic emissions, SOAEs. This is scientifically valid and likely explains some individual cases of people who believe they hear a hum. However, it struggles to account for the distinct geographic clustering of reports why so many people in Taos, but not in Santa Fe, and the consistent subjective experience of an external sound that can be escaped by changing location. Third, the infrasound and low-frequency noise theory. This is a broad category. Infrasound is sound at frequencies below 20 Hz, beneath the normal limit of human hearing. It can be generated by a huge variety of sources: wind turbines, large-scale weather patterns, ocean waves, shipping traffic, even volcanoes. While we can't hear it in the traditional sense, infrasound can have documented physiological effects, including feelings of unease, anxiety, dread, and even the sensation of a presence in a room. It's theorized that some hums could be the result of a powerful, localized source of infrasound, and that the hearers are individuals whose sensitivity is just on the cusp of perceiving these vibrations audibly. Fourth, and perhaps the most elegant and all-encompassing natural theory, is the geological theory. Some scientists, notably geologist David Deming, have proposed that the hum could be the result of microseisms, tiny, continuous vibrations of the Earth's crust. These are not earthquakes, but a constant low-level tremor caused by a multitude of sources, with the primary driver being the energy of ocean waves pounding on continental shelves thousands of miles away. The idea is that under the right geological conditions, these microvibrations, which are always present everywhere on Earth, could be amplified by specific local rock formations and transmitted into the air, creating an audible, low-frequency sound. This theory is beautiful because it proposes a natural, global source, which could explain why hums pop up in different, seemingly random locations all over the planet. Each location might have a unique geological lens that focuses this global background noise into something perceptible. The hum, then, is likely a complex tapestry woven from threads of all these theories. Some cases are industrial, some are biological, and some may well be geological. And some might remain a genuine, unsolved mystery, a persistent whisper from the earth that we have not yet learned how to decipher. But the hum, as unsettling and life-altering as it is for those who experience it, is a subtle threat. It's a slow-burn mystery, a chronic, grinding condition. The other sound we are investigating today is anything but subtle. It is loud, it is dramatic, it is acute, and it is, for many who hear it, an experience of pure, unadulterated, primal terror. We need to shift our focus from the ground beneath our feet to the vast, open sky above our heads. It is time to talk about the sky trumpets. Part 2. The Apocalyptic Roar. Chapter 6. The Digital Harbinger. Imagine the scene. It's a calm, ordinary afternoon. You're at home, perhaps washing the dishes, your mind wandering. Or maybe you're outside, walking your dog through a familiar park. The sky is a placid blue, or maybe lightly overcast. Suddenly, the air itself begins to change. It begins to vibrate, and it is filled with an impossible sound. It is not the roar of a jet plane passing overhead. It is not the distant rumble of a train. It is not the rising wail of a civil defense siren. It is a deep, resonant, and profoundly metallic sound. It groans and moans, sometimes sounding like a discordant, out-of-tune chorus of giant brass instruments, other times like the grinding of immense, unseen machinery in the heavens. It seems to echo across the entire vault of the sky, coming from no single point, and it lasts for several minutes before finally, slowly fading away, leaving behind a stunned, ringing silence and a heart pounding against your ribs like a trapped bird. This is the quintessential experience of those who have heard what the internet has collectively and dramatically dubbed sky trumpets, or, more ominously, apocalyptic sounds. Unlike the hum, which has a documented, if obscure, history stretching back through the 20th century, the sky trumpets are a distinctly 21st century phenomenon, at least in their cultural impact. Their story is inextricably linked to the rise of social media and video sharing platforms like YouTube. The mystery exploded into the global consciousness in a very specific and curious window of time, roughly between 2011 and 2012. It was as if a switch had been flipped somewhere in the world. Suddenly, videos began appearing from all corners of the globe, from dozens of countries, all capturing a disturbingly similar, bizarre, and terrifying acoustic event. Chapter 7. A Catalogue of Cacophony. Let's examine some of the foundational evidence, the key videos that built this phenomenon. One of the earliest and still most famous videos was uploaded from Kiev, the capital of Ukraine, in August of 2011. The footage itself is unremarkable. A shaky handheld shot of a typical urban apartment block against a gray, overcast sky. But the sound is what is extraordinary. It's a complex cacophony of groaning, metallic wails that seem to fill the air, rising and falling in pitch and intensity, layered with other, stranger noises. It sounds both organic and mechanical. The person filming is audibly unnerved, muttering in confusion. The video went viral, racking up millions of views and igniting a firestorm of speculation, analysis, and imitation. Then came the video from Terrace, British Columbia, Canada, recorded in 2012. A woman named Kimberly Woo-Kee is woken up early in the morning by the sound. She grabs her camera and rushes outside. She captures a deeply unsettling, grinding, industrial noise that seems to be emanating from the clouds themselves. Her young son can be heard in the background, asking with childlike innocence, "What is that?" Her dog whines and paces, clearly distressed by the sound, a detail many point to as evidence of the sound's physical reality. Woo-Kee recorded the sounds on multiple occasions, adding to her credibility. From Conklin, Alberta, Canada, in a much more remote, wooded area, a video emerged showing a group of friends in a yard. Suddenly, a powerful, almost pure trumpet-like sound, a single, sustained, metallic blast, echoes through the valley. They look around, bewildered, trying and failing to pinpoint a source in the seemingly empty landscape. Their live, unscripted reactions of, "What the hell was that?" are a key part of the video's unsettling power. The list goes on and on. A video from Melbourne, Australia, captures a deep, vibrating hum, punctuated by strange metallic flourishes, recorded over the city skyline at night. A video from Germany captures a similar grinding, groaning sound over a quiet town. From Indonesia, from Hungary, from Brazil, from dozens of states across the USA, the list is staggering. From bustling metropolises to the most remote forests, people were recording the same family of strange, unearthly sounds. The immediate reaction from the global public was a potent mixture of awe, fear, and intense, unbridled speculation. The sheer character of the sound, so powerful, so alien, so unlike any familiar noise, naturally led people to the most dramatic of conclusions. The name Sky Trumpets itself is not neutral. It is loaded with eschatological baggage. It immediately evokes chapter 8 of the Book of Revelation in the New Testament, and the 7 trumpets blown by 7 angels to signal the onset of the apocalypse. For many people of Christian faith, these sounds were not a mystery to be solved by science, but a literal sign from God, a prophecy being fulfilled before our very eyes and ears. The apocalyptic narrative took hold and became a powerful, self-reinforcing part of the phenomenon's lore, especially given the widespread cultural anxiety surrounding the year 2012 and the supposed end of the Mayan calendar. Chapter 8. The Hoax Hunters and the Signal in the Noise. But, of course, with any viral internet phenomenon comes a healthy and necessary dose of skepticism. The first and most obvious line of criticism is, how many of these videos are simple, deliberate hoaxes? The answer is, without a shadow of a doubt, a significant number of them are. It is relatively easy for anyone with basic video editing software to take an innocuous video of the sky and overlay a dramatic, pre-existing sound effect. A global community of internet sleuths, debunkers, and skeptics got to work, meticulously analyzing the audio tracks of the most popular videos. They made some key and damning discoveries. They found that the audio from some of the most watched Sky Trumpet compilation videos was lifted directly from the soundtracks of Hollywood movies. A particularly common source was the terrifying, groaning sound design of the alien tripods from the 2005 Tom Cruise film War of the Worlds. Another was the sound effect used in the 2011 Kevin Smith horror film Red State, which features a similar trumpet-like blast. Once you know what you're listening for, you can listen to these debunked videos and clearly identify the stolen audio. This proved, conclusively, that a large part of the online phenomenon was polluted with fakes. So, does this mean the entire phenomenon is nothing more than a global prank? A simple case of copycat videos and internet-fueled sensationalism? This is where the mystery pushes back, refusing to be so easily dismissed. While many, perhaps even most, of the viral videos are demonstrably fake, it is a logical fallacy to conclude that all of them are. There remains a core set of recordings that have not been successfully or convincingly debunked. These often come from independent, credible witnesses who seem genuinely perplexed by what they're hearing. The videos often include the live, unscripted, and confused reactions of people and animals, which are much harder to fake convincingly than just laying a stock audio track over a video. Furthermore, and this is a crucial point, reports of these sounds predate the YouTube era by centuries. They were just known by different names. They were called skyquakes or brontides. In the area around Seneca Lake in upstate New York, they were known as the Seneca guns. In the Ganges Delta of India and Bangladesh, they were the Barisal guns. On the coast of Belgium, they were mist puffers, or fog belches. These are all historical accounts, going back to the 19th century and earlier, of unexplained booming, cannon-like, or trumpeting sounds from the sky, often heard in the absence of a storm or any other visible cause. They were just isolated local curiosities, ghost stories told in small towns, pieces of regional folklore. The internet didn't invent the sounds. It just provided a platform for people to share their experiences on a global scale and realize, for the very first time, that they weren't alone. The challenge, then, for the serious investigator, is to sift through the digital noise of the hoaxes and try to analyze the credible reports, the signal in the noise. Assuming that there is a real, underlying phenomenon here, what could possibly be causing it? Chapter 9. The Symphony of the Spheres. Scientific Explanations. The theories for the sky trumpets are just as wide-ranging and fascinating as those for the hum. Let's break them down into their respective scientific domains. The groaning earth, geology, one of the oldest and most common theories, which ties directly into the historical skyquake reports, is that these sounds are caused by shallow tectonic activity. The immense pressure and friction from the grinding of tectonic plates deep within the earth can create powerful acoustic energy. While most of this energy travels through the solid ground as the seismic waves we know as earthquakes, it's theorized that some of this energy, particularly from shallow quakes, could be transmitted directly into the atmosphere, creating a powerful, audible sound. The metallic, grinding, groaning quality of many recordings certainly fits this description. It sounds like rock being scraped and broken under immense, unimaginable pressure. It's the sound of the planet's bones creaking. B. The atmospheric duct, meteorology. Another plausible and less dramatic theory involves specific and unusual atmospheric conditions. Large, rapid shifts in air pressure, perhaps caused by the collision of different air masses or extreme temperature changes, could potentially generate powerful sound waves. More compellingly, a phenomenon known as a temperature inversion, where a layer of warm air sits on top of a layer of cooler air near the ground, can act as a remarkably efficient atmospheric duct. This duct can trap sound waves, especially low-frequency ones, and allow them to travel for enormous distances hundreds of miles with very little loss of energy. This could explain why a sound originating from a distant, perfectly mundane Sauersee quarry blast, a large industrial plant, a military exercise on a bombing range, or even the loud shunting of railway cars in a freight yard could be heard hundreds of miles away, seeming to come from the empty sky itself, its original source completely hidden by the curvature of the earth. See, the song of the sun, astrophysics. Then there are the space-based theories. Could these sounds be meteors entering the atmosphere? While large meteors or bolides can create spectacular sonic booms, they typically don't produce the long, drawn-out, groaning, multi-tone sounds reported in the most compelling sky trumpet cases. A far more compelling and scientifically grounded extraterrestrial theory involves our own sun. The sun is constantly bombarding our planet with a stream of charged particles known as the solar wind. Our planet's magnetic field, the magnetosphere, acts as our protective shield, deflecting the vast majority of this harmful radiation. When the solar wind is particularly strong and gusty, after a solar flare or a coronal mass ejection, it can cause the magnetosphere to vibrate, resonate, and ripple like a giant, invisible drum being struck in space. This complex interaction produces a variety of plasma waves. These waves are not sound waves in the traditional sense, but they can be converted into audible sound by special radio receivers. The phenomenon is known as the auroral chorus, because it's often, but not always, associated with the aurora borealis and australis. NASA has released recordings of these sounds of space, and they are genuinely otherworldly, a series of strange chirps, whistles, and whooshes. Could a particularly intense solar storm produce the lower frequency, groaning, metallic sounds of the sky trumpets? It's a definite possibility that these are the audible artifact of a powerful geomagnetic storm. The sounds are certainly alien enough. D. The HARP conspiracy. Of course, we cannot have a serious discussion about strange atmospheric phenomena in the 21st century without mentioning the king of all modern conspiracy theories. HARP, the High-Frequency Active Auroral Research Program, is, officially, a university-run research facility in Gakona, Alaska, designed to study the ionosphere, the electrically charged upper layer of our atmosphere. It uses a powerful array of antennas to transmit high-frequency radio waves upwards, temporarily and harmlessly exciting a small patch of the ionosphere and allowing scientists to observe the results. To a large and vocal community of conspiracy theorists, however, HARP is much, much more than a simple research station. They believe it is a clandestine superweapon, capable of controlling the weather, triggering earthquakes and volcanoes, manipulating human minds, and, you guessed it, generating strange and terrifying sounds in the sky. The idea is that by using its powerful transmitter to cause the ionosphere to resonate at specific frequencies, HARP could be creating massive plasma vibrations that translate into the audible, apocalyptic sounds of the sky trumpets, perhaps as a test of a new form of psychological warfare. Is there any truth to this? Mainstream science says an emphatic no. The energy output of HARP, while powerful by terrestrial standards, is utterly minuscule compared to the natural energy delivered to the ionosphere by the sun during a single solar storm, or even by a single large lightning strike. But for those who harbor a deep-seated distrust of official explanations and secret government projects, HARP remains the prime suspect, a shadowy program playing God with our atmosphere and creating a symphony of fear. Part 3. The Unifying Theories and the Great Unknown. Chapter 10. A Planet in Conversation. We have now explored our two central mysteries in great depth. The hum, a low, persistent, maddening drone that seems to rise from the earth to torment a select and sensitive few. And the sky trumpets, loud, dramatic, transient blasts that seem to fall from the heavens to startle and terrify the many. On the surface, they seem like polar opposites, two entirely unrelated phenomena. One is subtle, the other grandiose. One is a chronic condition, the other an acute event. One is a whisper, the other a scream. But what if they're not separate phenomena at all? What if they are two sides of the same coin? What if the hum and the sky trumpets are different expressions, different moods of the same underlying planetary process? This is where we enter the speculative but exciting realm of grand, unifying theories. Let's for a moment consider the Earth itself not as a dead, inert rock, but as a single, complex, dynamic system, a living organism, in a metaphorical Gaian sense. Like any complex system, it generates noise. It has a pulse, it has a breath, it has moments of deep calm and moments of violent stress and release. Let's revisit the geological theory. The Earth's crust is a mosaic of massive tectonic plates, all floating on a sea of molten rock, constantly shifting, grinding, and building up immense stress. Perhaps the hum is the acoustic byproduct of this constant, slow-motion friction. It's the low-level, continuous groan of a planet under pressure, a sound usually below our hearing but perceptible in certain locations with the right geology, or to certain people with sensitive hearing. The hum is the planet's baseline resonance, its resting state of tension. Now, what happens when that built-up stress is suddenly released? Usually, you get an earthquake. But what if the release is not purely seismic? What if a massive pocket of pressurized gas deep within the crust is suddenly vented? Or what if a section of rock slips in a way that generates a powerful atmospheric pressure wave? This sudden, violent release of terrestrial energy could be what we perceive as a sky trumpet. It would be the same system, just expressing itself more dramatically. In this model, Earth as an instrument. The hum is the sound of the bow being drawn slowly across the strings of a colossal cello, building tension. The sky trumpet is the sudden, loud, discordant note that is played. They are inextricably linked, part of the same terrestrial symphony. Chapter 11. The lithosphere-atmosphere-ionosphere bridge. We can take this unifying idea even further into the cutting edge of planetary science. There is a growing field of study focused on what is called lithosphere-atmosphere-ionosphere coupling, or LAIC. This is the idea that the different layers of our planet's system, the rock, lithosphere, the air, atmosphere, and the charged particles high above, ionosphere, are all intricately connected and can influence one another in ways we are only just beginning to understand. There is growing evidence that before major earthquakes, strange phenomena occur in the upper atmosphere. The immense stress in the rocks before a quake can generate electrical currents and release radon gas and other charged particles. These can travel up into the atmosphere and ionosphere, causing measurable disturbances, temperature changes, and electromagnetic anomalies. So what if the process works like this? Stress builds up deep within the Earth's crust. This constant stress generates low-frequency vibrations, perceived by sensitives as the hum. As the stress reaches a critical point, it releases a burst of electromagnetic energy and charged particles. This energy travels up into the ionosphere, causing it to resonate and vibrate, creating the powerful, metallic, groaning sounds of the sky trumpets. And then, sometime later hours, days, or weeks, that same terrestrial stress is finally released physically in the form of an earthquake. In this speculative but scientifically plausible scenario, the sounds are a precursor, an auditory warning sign of deeper geological turmoil. This is a radical idea, but one that neatly ties together the hum, the sky trumpets, and even provides a potential physical mechanism for their occurrence. Chapter 12. The widening crack in the wall of perception. Then there's the final, and perhaps most mind-bending possibility. What if the central mystery isn't in the source of the sounds, but in us? in our ability or inability to perceive them. Human consciousness experiences the world through a remarkably narrow sensory apparatus. Our eyes can only see a tiny fraction of the electromagnetic spectrum, a sliver of rainbow between the vast, unseen oceans of infrared and ultraviolet. We can't see the radio waves that carry our broadcasts or the microwaves that cook our food. It is exactly the same with sound. Our ears are only tuned to a specific, limited range of frequencies. We are deaf to the deep infrasound used by elephants and whales, and we are deaf to the high-pitched ultrasound used by bats and dolphins. The world is, at all times, filled with a constant, roaring cacophony of sights and sounds that are completely invisible and inaudible to us. We live inside a sensory bubble, and we mistake the interior of that bubble for the entirety of reality. What if, for some reason, that bubble is starting to get thinner? What if, due to some subtle but significant shift in the Earth's magnetic field, or some little understood change in human biology, or even just the simple, ubiquitous proliferation of highly sensitive digital recording devices, we are starting to perceive things that were always there, but were previously locked outside our sensory range? Perhaps the hum has always been the background noise of the planet, the sound of the geodynamic engine, and a small but growing number of us are just now, for whatever reason, developing the sensitivity to hear it. Perhaps the sky trumpets are the sounds of immense natural processes that have been happening for eons, and our smartphones, with their surprisingly sensitive microphones, are finally capable of capturing them reliably and bringing them to our collective attention. In this view, the mystery isn't that the world is suddenly getting noisier. It's that we, as a species, are for the first time starting to truly listen. We are like a person who has lived their entire life in a soundproof room, and suddenly, a crack appears in the wall. Through that crack, for the very first time, they can hear the faint, strange, and inexplicable sounds of the world outside. It would be confusing, it would be frightening, and it would be completely inexplicable at first. Chapter 13. The Echo Chamber of the Information Age. Of course, we must address the most rational and Occam's razor-friendly explanation for the increase in reports. It's not that the sounds are new, but that our ability to share them is. In 1985, if someone in a small town in rural Canada heard a strange sound from the sky, it remained a local story, a piece of folklore told over a beer at the local pub. In 2015, they can film it on their phone, upload it to the internet within minutes, and instantly connect with someone in a suburb of Sydney, Australia, who heard the very same thing. The Bader-Meinhof phenomenon, the frequency illusion, tells us that once you become aware of something new, you start seeing it everywhere. Have we, as a global society, simply learned the concept of strange sounds from the sky, and are now noticing them more often, creating a feedback loop of awareness and reporting? This is a rational, logical explanation, and it is almost certainly a huge part of the answer for the explosion of reports. But for many, it doesn't quite satisfy the feeling, the deep-seated sense of unease and profound strangeness that these sounds create. It doesn't explain away the raw, visceral fear in the voices of those who record the sky trumpets, or the quiet, soul-crushing desperation of those who have been tormented for years by the hum. It explains the spread of the story, but not necessarily the origin of every report. Chapter 14, Coda, the Enduring Mystery. And so, after this long journey, we find ourselves standing at the edge of a great auditory unknown. We have a box full of puzzle pieces, but no picture on the lid to show us what the final image should look like. We have industrial noise, tectonic plates, solar winds, mass psychology, government conspiracies, and biblical prophecy, all vying for our attention, all demanding to be considered as the one true explanation. The truth, if it is ever to be known, is likely a complex, messy, and deeply unsatisfying tapestry woven from threads of all these theories. Some hums are factories. Many sky trumpet videos are hoaxes. But it is intellectually dishonest, and frankly less interesting to dismiss the entire global multi-decade phenomenon so easily. There remains a persistent, stubborn core of credible, deeply strange reports that resist any and all simple explanations. A signal buried deep in the noise. These sounds force us to confront the humbling limits of our own understanding. They serve as a powerful reminder that we are small, fragile beings on a vast, powerful, and incredibly noisy planet, which itself is floating in an even vaster, more powerful, and noisier cosmos. We have mapped the continents, we have explored the deepest trenches of our oceans, we have sent robotic probes to the furthest reaches of our solar system. And yet, we cannot definitively explain a sound in our own backyard, or in the sky directly above our heads. The mystery endures. The reports have not stopped. Right now, at this very moment, somewhere in the world, someone is likely lying awake in the dark, listening to a low, maddening drone that no one else can hear, feeling desperately, crushingly alone. And somewhere else, perhaps tomorrow or next week, someone might be about to rush outside, phone in hand, to capture a sound from the sky that will defy all logic and chill them to the very bone. The world is still whispering and groaning, and sometimes it seems it screams. And we are all still straining, listening to the static, trying to understand what, if anything, it's trying to tell us. So, what do you think? After this exhaustive journey through the case files, the scientific theories, the conspiracies, and the human stories, where do you land on the spectrum of belief? Are these sounds simply the mundane, terrestrial chatter of industry and geology, amplified and distorted through the strange and powerful echo chamber of the internet age? Or are they something more? A genuine, unexplained mystery that points to forces and phenomena that lie beyond our current, limited comprehension? Have you ever heard something you couldn't explain? A low drone in the dead of night that seemed to vibrate in your very soul? Or a strange, metallic groan from a clear blue sky? The world is a very large place. These stories are everywhere, and your personal experience is a valuable piece of this global, crowdsourced puzzle. I want to hear your experiences, your theories, your local legends. Let's continue this investigation together as a community. Share your stories and your thoughts in the comments section below. Do you have a local named Hum in your town or city? Have you come across a credible, compelling sky trumpet video that you believe deserves a closer, more rigorous look? The more we share, the more data points we have, the more pieces of this enigmatic puzzle we can attempt to assemble. And if you found this very deep dive into the world of unexplained sounds compelling, if you enjoy exploring the shadowy boundaries of the known and the unknown, then please consider supporting the channel. It is your support that allows us to spend the significant time needed to research and write these long-form, in-depth investigations. Make sure to like this video, subscribe for more deep dives into uncharted mysteries, and be sure to hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next journey into the strange and the unexplained. Thank you for listening, and until next time, pay close attention to the silence. You never, ever know what you might hear when you truly decide to listen.